everyone. Welcome to the Fly Racing GNCC post-race show here on digitaloffroad.com, coming to you from River Ranch, Florida, round one of the Can-Am GNCC series. I'm your host, Jason Hooper, with a very special guest, the originator of the post-race show, but not for GNCC.
Yeah.
OG GNCC guy, too.
I'm
Jason
pumped, though, because, like, you ask the questions, and I just get to make the answers. I don't have to run this at all. Like, you control it. It's like a vacation for me, but not a bad place to have a vacation. It's pretty fun down here.
Oh, this is a great place to have a race. We have facilities, which is something that we don't always get at a GNCC.
Yes.
So we got restaurant, we have a bar, saloon, hotel, airport runway, golf course. It's a great place to be.
Right. So we'll make this show fairly short because the restaurant's right over there, and that's where everyone wants to go after a long day at the race.
And we're very hungry.
Yeah.
So we'll just start out right from the get-go. From the XC1 Pro class, the whole shot goes to Paul Whibley. The same thing that he did last year, except for last year he ripped his radiator off about a mile into the race. This year, that was not the case.
What's amazing about Whibley, by the way, is that when he first came into this series years ago, he was known as like the worst starter in the history of racing. Not only horrible off the start, but then the first couple of laps couldn't even get going. He would start dead last, then get arm pump, and ride about 15th halfway through the race. Now he is probably the best starter. Wouldn't you say he's probably had more whole shots last 2-3 years than anyone?
Without a doubt, the most consistent starter we have. And, you know, right behind him, probably the second most consistent last year, Charlie Mullins, championship rival, the guy who would be wearing the number 1 plate, but he was wearing the 112. And right behind him in second. And that, I mean, pretty much that was the battle that we wanted to have. You know, we wanted to see these top two guys, and then we had another guy that snuck in there, too, for a little while.
I was kind of wondering going into this season, because to me it's kind of a make or break. We all know that there isn't this safety net that there used to be anymore as far as getting rides go. You really got to perform. You got to earn your paycheck, not just here, but in any form of motorsports right now. And honestly, although you know Mullins and Whibley are going to be the guys up front, these other riders have to start showing the potential to challenge them, or they are not going to be even racing any longer. There's not much time anymore. So I was really curious to see if anyone would be able to step up and show they can get in there. The way the race kind of turned out, it was those two, but there were flashes from some others at least.
Right, we had Caleb Russell that got up there early, kind of worked his way up, and actually made a pass on Charlie to get a second. And it looked like Caleb was going to go for it. He was going to take the lead, and then a little disaster struck there.
Yeah, I talked to Caleb just before we did this show. He got in the second, and he said, I'm behind Whibley. I'm just going to stay here all day. If that means I finish on the podium, that's perfect. I don't want to crash. I don't want to get myself tired. I'll just stay with him. And if I stay with Whibley, I'm going to have a good finish, guaranteed.
Right.
And then he and Mullins together missed a turn, and when they tried to get back on the track, I guess Mullins was okay. He got stuck in some vines. That was bad enough, and then he said he moved back up to third or fourth.
Right.
Crashed, and that pretty much did his day in.
Yeah, and so it sounded like he has a shoulder injury, could be a possible separated shoulder.
Yeah.
He's going to go to the doctor tomorrow to find out for sure. But either way, not a good start to the 2012 season. Same as last year. Last year he had bike problems. This year he had injuries. It's not the start that Caleb Russell was looking for.
No, and the toughest thing about the Florida races, and we'll touch on this, is that you have such little recovery time. It's the worst race to have that scenario.
Right.
You're going to wipe yourself out even if you don't get hurt. He is hurt. He thinks he's going to be able to ride in Georgia, but you got to ride 3 hours, man. And 5 days from now, I'm not sure. And if you go 0 for the first 2 rounds, you're in big trouble as far as the title is concerned.
Right, and we saw that happen to him last year where he pretty much had DNFs at the first 2 races and then was super consistent for the rest of the year, but he was out of contention. It really didn't matter. So that was a shame for Caleb, so we'll see what happens with him in Georgia. Then we had another rider, the Sandman, Garrett Edmonston, back. And actually, last year he was riding pretty good in Florida too, and he went for the lead and then crashed out. This year he hung around a little bit longer.
It was in the lead. It was in the lead for a while, and when you come down here to Florida, what's Vero Beach where he's from? 45 minutes away?
Right.
He's got a lot of people supporting him, so they were really starting
the biggest
cheer.
cheers.
Yes.
At the start, out of everyone there.
Really? At an opening ceremony?
Yes, without a doubt, the biggest cheers were.
When he came by in the lead, he was leading Whibley, I think, the 3rd lap in. They were going nuts. And then all these people had the Garrett Edmonston Sandman shirts on. They were pumped, but kind of the same thing. We saw Caleb up there for a while, then we see Caleb cruising into the pits with his arm dangling. About a lap later, you see Garrett Edmonston riding, sitting down, I suppose just completely exhausted, but no longer in contention.
Right, and then so that pretty much we had it separated, the top 2 guys there, Whibley and Mullins, and then the third guy that comes into the mix, Rory Mead, completely out of nowhere. We just watched the footage from the whole shot, dead last. Completely, without a doubt, dead last, like 50 bike lengths dead last.
I was surprised because I did not even realize that he had a deal to race the whole series. He came in for a few rounds last year and did really well, but untested on this type of course. Man, this guy's in it for the long haul. He could be the one that ends up making the name for himself. Like I said, there's a lot of guys you expect to step up this year. I probably wouldn't have had him on my list, but here we go. He could be the one to do it.
Right, and Rory showed himself last year. He had, I think, his best finish was 4th at Snowshoe. Yep. So, and he did really well at an endurocross that he raced. So I'm like, okay, so maybe he's a technical guy. Maybe he's going to be that guy kind of like Nate Caney where he's going to do really well in these technical races. But we didn't really know because he didn't come in until like the 6th or 7th race of the season last year. So we have no idea if he can ride sand. And apparently can. And he did it on a 350.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense. You should be on a 450. You need all the power you can to get out of the turns is the theory, right?
That's well, no, there's a million theories because the other theory is a 350 takes less energy, but then someone will say, yeah, but you have to ride it so hard it takes more energy, so we will never solve these problems.
Right, and it was tough to tell with him because he kind of faded at the end, and I'm sure he exerted himself pretty well just to get from dead last all the way up. And, you know, in Florida we have a stacked pro field like always, so it wasn't like he had 5 guys to go through. He had quite a few riders to go through and quite a lot of really good guys to pass.
This race is so hard to judge. It makes it great for an opener because you really can't answer the questions. You need to go to the next race and then maybe really round 3 before you really can figure out where everyone stacks up. Because the problem at Florida is I think the guys like Whibley and Mullins that know they're going to be there at the end, they know their pace. They know how hard they can run. They just do that. That means if you're someone else, if you want to go wide open, you can pass them. You can take the lead. You can make a name for yourself to the end. Any one of those guys in the pro class is fast enough to do that. And, man, when you see a fun section of sand whoops, it's probably tempting.
Right, and the easiest way is the fastest way, but you for 3 hours, pinning it, keeping that thing straight, it's you just can't do it. I mean, I watched Charlie and Paul ride around out there, and that's what it looked like at some points. They were just riding around.
Right.
You know, like, so I was trying to figure out, is Charlie, you know, is he waiting? Is he, you know, and Whibley is the wrong guy to try and do that with because, you know, if anyone in the field is going to still have it at the end of the race, it's going to be him. So, and at the end, it was
those two guys.
Those two guys, and it was just Charlie just didn't have anything for him. I mean, and then we saw them collapse at the finish line, which was reminiscent of the Doug Henry collapse 5 years ago or whatever that was. I mean, the guys were spent. And while it looked like they were just riding around, I mean, they dropped the hammer on that last lap, and that was all it took to just completely exert them.
Right, so exactly. So you can't judge the other rider, so you could say that, wow, Rory Mead showed he has the speed to challenge them, or Emiston, or Caleb, or anyone else who had a flash of brilliance, but is that just because they weren't smart enough to conserve their energy, or are they legitimately that fast? It's impossible to judge. And I don't think you'll get the answer in Georgia either. It's too early.
Right, yeah. You'll start to figure it out a little bit more. Steel Creek, Big Buck, and then because, like we said, the recovery time, we'll see who's fit. We'll see who's real fit, and who didn't kill themselves today might be the guys that can do that.
Yeah, there's a couple riders that I want to give credit to for that. I think Thad Duvall rode a pretty smart race. I don't think he went over the limit. I think he was aided by the fact that he probably was just trying to make sure the bike finished. Incidentally, probably saved himself a bunch of energy, so he could be in good shape for the next one. I never saw any fire maybe from Corey Buttrick per se, but maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long series. We all know that. Those guys were consistent. You know, Chris Bach, he was another guy, kind of waited for that charge that he's done the past few years here to put himself on the podium, and he didn't have it. But he's not super far out of the points.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's another guy that could be it. And then, so, I mean, it was a good race. And I guess another good race. We've got to talk about this XC2 class because it was crazy.
Well, it ended up being a factor in XC1 in a way, just like you would expect. But that's that strange thing about Florida. I feel like the biggest story coming into this year, Whibley and Mullins, we've seen them battle before. It was how much of an improvement could Stuart Baylor make this year? Could he really get to the point where he was contending for overalls? And now we're into the race. What did you think?
I was blown away what was going on with Stuart Baylor. You know, he dumped it in the first turn.
Yep.
But he's got the speed that you could expect him from a first turn crash to go back up to that lead pack in a few miles.
Yep.
Yeah. And we've seen him kill it at the National Enduros, and I didn't know what was up. I mean, was he choking? Could he not handle the pressure? There's been so much hype leading up to this about him being a challenger for the overall, and he was a ways back. I talked to Glenn Carney. He said he rode with him, and he was all over the place, and he passed him. And Stewart admitted that he crashed a bunch, and it just was not the Stuart Baylor that we were used to seeing. But the guy who was riding like we thought Stuart Baylor would ride, Jace Lewis, was out front, just putting in a 30-minute +2 moto and just completely checked out from everyone.
And then eventually the Husky guys got up front. Glenn Carney's in the lead. Had his teammate Jason Thomas with him, and I thought, well, Baylor's struggling. You don't expect Chase Lewis to stay there the whole time. So it's going to be one of these two guys for sure. Baylor is out of this one.
Done. Yeah, yep. I thought he had no chance.
Not quite.
No. He just started working his way up. Next thing you know, you see him, he's riding there with GK. Yep. And then he pulled the trigger. I don't know exactly what he did. He said he figured he was having trouble riding. He wasn't riding like himself. He got pissed. And he freaking took off, and he was like, and then he just starts reeling in XC1 guys, and I'm sure that was kind of like, it was nice for him to have that little carrot just dangling out there.
Right.
Pick one of these guys off, and by the end of the race, he was third physically. He had passed Rory Mead before the finish. He ended up, I didn't see the final overalls, but I know at one point he was within 40 seconds of unadjusted time of the overall, which is impressive after the start that he had.
I think it was 1:20 when the last lap began, and then I don't know if you can go through a corner faster than he did after he got the white flag, the turn after that to start the last lap, and then lo and behold, we heard he cut that from 1:20 to 40 seconds. So I don't know. If you're Stuart Baylor, do you say, if I could have easily gotten a minute back at the beginning of the race. The beginning of the race is terrible.
Right.
Or is that the way Florida is? If you save energy and don't ride all out at the beginning, it's going to come back in the end. It's just so hard to judge. But I feel like you got to say he lived up to the hype in the end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he redeemed himself for sure. You know, all of us were kind of questioning what was going on with him, and I'm sure he probably was having a little soul-searching session going on out there, like, what, because he's not a shy kid to talk about. He's got some confidence, and he's talked about it very openly that it's his goal to win an overall this year. And I was like, man, Stuart, not going to happen.
Right.
But then another rider, Jesse Robinson, was a guy that was way back, worked his way up, then dropped off again. And I was kind of wondering, Jesse spent a lot of time down here in Florida riding with the Sandman, and he kind of figured that he would be a contender, and he slowly worked his way up. Glenn Carney had a problem, got stuck in a mud pit right before the pits, went over the bars, so he dropped from second to fourth. Jason Thomas and Jesse Robinson got around him, and then he thought he was done. He said, "There's no way I'm going to catch these guys," and he kind of had a little moment of
soul searching as well.
Where he kind of, it's like, what am I doing here? Why did I come all this way to get fourth? This wasn't the deal. And then he put the hammer down and started reeling in Jason Thomas, who was kind of doing the opposite. I guess was kind of going backwards, and GK ended up third.
If any races can explain to you that these are 3-hour, endurance races, they are not sprints, they are marathons. It is this. I think every rider except Whibley probably had a moment in this race where they were really good, and then a moment where they were really bad. Whibley was probably the only one that was pretty much good all day. Everyone else had their, what's wrong with this guy? And also their, wow, this guy's flying moments. But that's racing for 3 hours in the sand, folks. You can't expect anyone to be blazing fast the entire time. I feel like it's happened before at this, but this track seems to be maybe a little bit more demanding. I mean, even when Mullins won it last year, battling with Mike Brown, I mean, those guys were dead when this race was over.
Right, and then we saw the adverse effects. Charlie, he just didn't have anything left in the tank in Georgia.
Exactly.
And, it didn't end up being a determining factor in the championship, luckily for him. But it's crazy to see a guy win a race and then just struggle to get a top 5. And so we're going to find out in a week, less than a week, 5 days, what it is, to see what happens. So.
Well, man, you start putting that all together and you think, okay, Whibley won. Mullins was tired big time at the end. Caleb's already hurt. I mean, you're looking at a lot of the guys that Whibley knew he was going to have to battle for this title that are already hurting, and he's already got a W. And if anyone's going to be able to recover quick, that's him. He could be in really good shape right now.
Yeah, you don't want to see – the competitors don't want to see momentum on that guy's side because he's not going to let up. He's not going to relent one bit. So it's going to be interesting. And then the same thing in the XC2. The best thing that could have happened for everybody else was for Stuart Baylor to get a second, a third, a fourth this weekend.
That's right.
You did not want him to be able to just put that dominating performance in. And it didn't look like he was going to do it, and that's what he did. And I mean, if that sets the tone for the rest of the season, it could be ugly because there weren't a whole lot of guys that had much for him at the end of that race.
No, I think you get in a situation for him where he starts setting his goals on other things. We saw in the ATV series as an XC2 class last year, and eventually the guy who was winning that series, his goal was to sweep the class and win every round and go after overall wins, which he was able to do. And I think that's what happens. You eventually have zero intimidation of the guys you're on the line. You set your goals at a totally different level. And if he does it a few more weeks, that's probably where he's going to be.
Right, and we kind of saw Caleb Russell do the same thing, where he would get out front, and he didn't even worry about who was in second.
Yep.
He was worried about how many guys in front of him that he could catch.
Exactly.
And then, they get up in there in the middle of, the top 5 XC1 Pro guys and end up just gapping everybody else in XC2. So, man, Jason Thomas, Glenn Carney, while you got one more race, Jesse Robinson, you guys, you get
it's your chance.
This is it. You got to go for it here when we get back into the clay in Georgia. Well,
all right.
We've probably talked enough, Weege. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know how you normally do this show, but I mean, I can go for a while. But
I
that's not
probably
really the
could
point,
too. And I don't know where else to go from here. I mean, it was fun. I'm so glad that we got to do this. We've been talking about it for a couple years since we started doing this, and it's tough to get this guy. Well, actually, this is your 3rd GNCC in a row. You did 2.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Lins
I went to both Loretta Lins. Yes. But I was too talkative to have time to talk on this show at Loretta's. I would have loved to have done it there. These are fun races to go to, folks. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You cannot find better people than at the GNCC series. So whenever I do have time, I'm going.
And hopefully we'll see you again. Really appreciate it, for sure.
No problem.
For full results and all that good stuff, make sure you go to gnccracing.com so you can check out all the points and the results. And next weekend, hit that back up so you can get the live timing. Make sure you follow GNCC Racing and Digital Off-Road on Twitter because and Racer X, actually.
Yeah,
but that might not last for the...
Yeah, that was me.
We had the most Twitter updates ever from a race. And obviously we'll be back with another post-race show on Monday after the Georgia GNCC. So I guess that's it.
I'll be watching. How about that? I'll watch. Do a good job. Keep me informed.
All right, we'll do. You got big shoes to fill for the next co-host.
All right, I'll really got to watch now to see who's going to step in here.
I don't know who you are, but if you're watching, let me know that you're interested in this. And that's it. We'll see it.